The old public library stood at the edge of town, its stone walls crumbling in places, its grand windows dark and cracked. To most people, it was an old, forgotten place, a relic of the past. But to Allison Harper, it was a job. She had recently started working the late shift there, hoping the solitude would give her time to think, to focus. She had always loved books, but little did she know that the library would become a place that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Allison's first night on the job was uneventful. She spent her hours shelving books, making sure the aisles were tidy, and occasionally helping the few late-night visitors who wandered in. But as the days passed, she began to notice strange things. At first, it was small. Books that had been perfectly arranged would be out of place when she returned to the shelf. The fiction section, her favorite part of the library, seemed to shift overnight. One evening, a book she could have sworn had been on the shelf for years was gone, only to reappear the next morning, out of order. The library was open 24 hours, but the late shift was always the quietest. There were no patrons after midnight, just the silence and the echo of her own footsteps. Or at least, that's what she thought. One night, around 2 a.m., she heard it. It started as a faint whisper. At first, she thought it was just the wind outside, rattling the windows. But then it became clearer, almost like voices, soft, hushed conversations echoing in the aisles. "Hello," she called out, but the library remained still, the aisles empty. The whispering didn't stop. It seemed to move, as if the voices were walking through the aisles, just out of sight. Her heart began to race, and she grabbed the flashlight, trying to peer around the corner of the shelves, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she quickly returned to her duties, trying to focus on the task at hand. But the strange occurrences only grew more frequent. A week later, as she was shelving a stack of new arrivals in the back corner of the library, something strange happened. A book, a large, leather-bound volume, slid from one of the shelves and fell to the floor. She bent down to pick it up, but before she could touch it, she noticed something odd. The book's cover was blank, nothing but a smooth, dark surface. She frowned. She had never seen this book before. Curious, she opened it. The pages were empty, completely blank. She flipped through them, confused. A new book, she thought. But then something strange occurred. The page she was on began to shift. The words appeared before her eyes, ink staining the paper like it was being written by an unseen hand. The text filled the page, each word appearing one after another as if the book were alive. It was as if someone, or something, was using the pages to speak to her. The words were a warning, a message she couldn't ignore. "You should never have come here." Her breath caught in her throat. The library felt different now, darker. The whispers she had been hearing grew louder, almost mocking her. She slammed the book shut, and the whispers stopped. But it was too late. The next night, things took a turn for the worse. The whispers returned, but now they were clearer, louder. She heard footsteps in the aisles, slow and deliberate, as though someone or something was following her. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The hairs on her neck stood on end as the sound of the footsteps grew nearer. She turned a corner quickly, half expecting to see someone. But no one was there. And yet the steps kept coming, growing louder with each passing second. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer. She took a step back, her hands shaking as she fumbled for her flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but it couldn't seem to reach far enough. The footsteps came closer, closer still. Her flashlight flickered. The beam wavered, casting eerie shadows on the shelves. In the distance, she saw something move. A shadow. But it wasn't a person. It was far too long, far too distorted. She ran. She sprinted down the aisles, her heart racing, her breath shallow. The footsteps were right behind her, echoing in the dark, chasing her as if they were alive. She couldn't escape the feeling that something was closing in on her. Finally, she reached the back of the library, panting and gasping for air. Her eyes scanned the shelves, looking for something, anything, that would make sense of what was happening. Then she saw it again, the book, the one with the blank cover. It was sitting on a shelf, right where it had fallen the night before. But now it was open, and the pages were filled with text, her darkest secrets, written in front of her eyes. The night will come. You will not survive. Panic gripped her. She slammed the book shut again, her hands trembling. What was this? Why was it writing about her? Was this some kind of curse? She heard the whispers again, but this time they were clearer, louder, more demanding. You must read it. You must know what's inside. The voice echoed in her mind. It wasn't just coming from the book anymore. It was in the air, in the walls, in the very library itself. Terror surged through her body. She had to get out. She had to leave before it was too late. But as she turned to leave, the lights flickered and went out, plunging her into total darkness. The footsteps started again. Closer, closer, closer. Allison spun around, trying to find her bearings. The library was no longer a safe place. It was a prison. She could hear them now, low, guttural whispers, voices that didn't belong to anyone in the world of the living. They were surrounding her. She reached for the door, but it wouldn't open. The lock was jammed. She screamed in frustration, her breath quickening, the panic swallowing her whole. Suddenly, she heard a laugh. A hollow, mirthless laugh that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. "Welcome," the voice whispered. Allison's body went cold. And then she understood. The library wasn't just a place of knowledge, it was a place of imprisonment. The books weren't just stories. They were traps. Sentient, cursed things that had been waiting for someone like her to come along. And now, she was part of their collection. The last thing Allison saw before she lost herself to the darkness was the book. The one that had started it all. Its pages were no longer blank. They were filled with her name, written over and over again, until it was all she could hear. Allison Harper. Allison Harper. And then the library went silent. The next morning, the library was open as usual. The doors creaked open to the first visitors of the day, but no one would notice anything strange. The shelves were filled with books, just as they had been the day before. But if anyone looked closely, they would see a new book resting on the top shelf. Its cover was blank, and it was waiting.